This video is about what to do before taking the practice exam. Here's the practice exam. The copy I will hand out to you says exam 1. It's actually the practice exam for exam 2. The best way to use this exam is as a mock exam. So study for the exam as not using this, and then when you're completely ready, sit down, give yourself 75 minutes, and take this as if it were a real exam. So things you should do before sitting down or even looking at what's inside the practice exam. You should complete all of the worksheets you've been given in class. Most of you are done with that because I've been checking it in class. Then you should go online and check the keys for these. I have posted keys for most of them, and the ones that are missing we've gone through in class pretty carefully. So if you are missing any answers and you aren't sure about them, please send me an email and I will quickly put more of a key up for you. So these are examples of keys that you can find on Moodle for the worksheets. Next, make a review sheet containing all the important information that could be on the exam. You'll get this from reviewing your notes, from watching the videos and notes you take in class, and then reviewing the worksheets that you've completed and make sure you understand the keys. So you should come up with a review sheet. If you can, draw each type of reaction once. So for example, acetal formation, there's an example of it in this worksheet. There was also a different example I believe we did in class, and it came up again in a later worksheet, another example of acetal formation in acidic conditions. So you might just want to draw one example of that. This is actually the reverse. You might want to draw both of them. But if you can, make the review sheet as concise as possible while still containing all the important information. And that will try to do that as soon as possible so you can review it several times before the exam. Once you have all of the material collected in one place, then practice writing the mechanisms as many times as you can. You might want to print and complete old worksheets again after you finish them as practice. A lot of them have examples of mechanisms in there, and that's an easy way of getting a blank sheet to just practice writing mechanisms on. Things that you should review from last exam. Again, this is before trying the practice exam. You should be able to draw skeletal structures. Most of you are good with this now. Assign formal charge. Some of you may want to go back and just look at that again. Practice assigning formal charge and nothing else, because that comes up again and again on mechanisms, and small mistakes with formal charge can end up costing you a lot of points overall. Determine hybridization. Again, some of you are still a little shaky on hybridization. That's also something you're still going to have to be able to do, although formal charge will come up more often probably than hybridization. Using electronegativity values to identify polar bonds. A lot of you are really shaky on this, to be honest. It's not going to come up very often, but it does in an explicit way, where I'll ask you, like here, like I did on the last exam, use these values to calculate how polar a bond is. But you should be able to look at bonds and know that whether they're polar and which direction they're polar. So an example is, we've talked about in class, OH is a polar bond, and you'll be given the electronegativities on your exam. So you know that oxygen is 3.4 and hydrogen is 2.2, 3.4 and 2.2. So you can tell this is a polar bond, and oxygen is the one pulling more electrons compared to the BH bond, for instance, where according to these numbers, boron is 2.0 and hydrogen is 2.2. So in this case, hydrogen is actually more electronegative, which is why hydrogen has some partial negative in this bond, whereas it usually has partial positive. So that's what I mean about understanding polar bonds. This comes up in reactions, why they react the way they do. But I won't ask explicitly to calculate using these numbers. They're just there to help you understand the molecules better. All right, drawing resonance structures. So this is a skill that I highly encourage you to practice more before this exam. Before the last exam, I gave you this resonance structure tips. This is a really good way to practice resonance structures, there's examples, and it takes you step by step different types of molecules that you draw resonance structures for. So this is in the folder for reviewing the exam, and also the key is posted there as well, so it's easy to find for this exam. The most recent folder on Moodle. All right, then naming simple structures. Let me find, that's right. I put, again, in that same review folder, just the last 2 pages of nomenclature we went over. So these ones. So if you go through just these 2 pages, which again, these are posted, that should be a pretty good review of nomenclature. There, on the practice exam, there is an aromatic compound like this. So this will help you name that. Also, on the reference sheet that you will be given, the nomenclature has this information too. So if you don't know this, it's confusing, you don't want to memorize a bunch, I have the important information here in the reference sheet, but try to go through these problems so that you know what to do with the information on the reference sheet. The last thing from the other exam is using IR and NMR to identify structures. And again, there were lots of NMR problems given before the last exam. Going back and doing some of these first ones are a good idea because they're kind of simple molecules, and I will probably have something similar on the practice exam. If you did one of these, it would look very similar to the question on the practice exam. That's again, this is I don't have a date on this, but I gave you this when we started talking about spectroscopy before the last exam. All right, things that you will get on the practice exam. So when you're all done studying and you're ready to go, and you sit down with this practice exam and you're pretending that it's the real exam, make sure that you have everything you will have with you in the real exam. So it says here, a pencil or pen, electronegativity values are given. I've also given you these guidelines for writing mechanisms. This will all be the same on your actual exam. Nomenclature, spectroscopy, and PK reference sheets will also be provided. So these are the same ones we got in class. Here's the pKa values. There's a front and back with even more pKa values. These should be sufficient for most things you're asked on the exam, so this will probably be the most important part of that reference sheet. Then again, this same spectroscopy sheet with on the back, there's kind of some cheat answers, like these give you hints as to what is in there based on patterns. And the nomenclature, all the functional groups. And then I mentioned before, here it has information for naming benzene derivatives. So you might want to take a closer look at these so that when you're at the exam, you know where information is and what information you're being given. That's all I want you to do before taking the practice exam, so please work on all of those things this weekend. Thanks.